Senator Pauline Hanson, great chatting with you this morning. Let's talk about the next state election in Australia, which is the Queensland state election. Now, Anastasia Palaszczuk has just made the announcement that her government has decided, after a parliamentary committee and taxi council submissions, that the review about a decision on what to do about cameras in all public transport won't happen for 18 months. Now, my concern is that if cameras are a safety issue, they should be in every car. And if they're not a safety issue, why do taxi drivers have to spend $4,000 investing it while their competition doesn't?
Well,
what are your thoughts?
Well, there's no level playing field as far as the taxi industry and Uber go. I'm not supportive of Uber. I can see the public want it out there because if it's a service that provides a cheaper taxi fare to them, and also, they can get it just on their phone. The thing is that people have to understand the taxi industry has been around, I think, since about the 1920s, was first started up. These are people that bought into it, they had to comply with it. Some people who came back from the war were offered land or a taxi plate, and that's how people got into the taxi industry.
Wow.
So anyway, then you've got, the plates cost a lot of money, and people were paying even up to $400,000, $500,000 a plate. So people will actually mortgage their properties to buy the plate. Right. That was a requirement under legislation put out by the Queensland state government. And then on top of that, the cost of it, you're looking at $8,000 a year just on having the car, the rego. Then you've got the insurance that they're paying around about that. Then they've got a compliance with all safety, security checks on cars, and the taxi base. These are privately owned small business people that have bought their taxi licences. And I don't believe the government is treating them fairly. Now, a lot of these people have gone on because now the price of those taxi plates have gone down to even $100,000 or lower. And all the government is asking to pay them out now is $20,000 per car, only up to 2 cars, 2 licences. So the government is not fair with this. I support the taxi industry. It's like when I had my shop, so I had to comply for all the rules and regulations, probably cost me thousands of dollars to set up, but the government then has allowed someone to camp outside my front door with their own trailer and still selling their food, and it's costing them nothing. And I've got to pay rents, I've got to pay the registration fees and everything. If we allow it to happen in the taxi industry, who is the next one? And another thing I'll tell people, this money does not stay in Australia. The money goes directly back to Amsterdam, and they don't pay GST on it. So there's no security, there's no safety whatsoever. And you hop into that Uber car, you don't know who the driver is, you don't know their qualifications of having to get that licence. So I think it's a risk to the public, but not only this, it's a small business that should not be allowed to go under.
I've got no problems with Uber. I'm happy for them to compete in the free marketplace and let the consumer decide.
Under the same rules.
But under the same rules.
Correct.
And either we toughen it up for Uber or we relax it for the taxi industry and say, okay, nobody has to pay GST, nobody needs security cameras, do whatever you want and let the market decide. If we're going to go free market, let's go free market. If we're going to go government regulation, let's do that. But to really tilt that, let somebody come in from overseas, kill our domestic industry and not play by the same rules, it's just like either get in the game or get out of it. But ideally, government should just get out of business.
One Nation gets in Queensland, we will sort this out.
Great. Now, what other issues do you see being pertinent in the upcoming Queensland election?
Look, I think we need to increase industry, or people wanting to come here for industries and manufacturing. We're actually looking at the payroll tax to actually reduce the payroll tax.
Fantastic.
So what we're saying is that if you're in a completely new industry and you're going to move to an area there that is not going to be competitive for existing industries, we will give you a 5-year grace period of payroll tax if you employ people up to 40. So we're wanting people to come up here, move to Queensland, start up your industry, start up your manufacturing. That's what we'd like to do. I'd like to see a Queensland bank start up so that we actually give people real competition in the banking sector. I've seen too much of the major banks that are actually controlling it, and at the expense of the clients. They're paying huge amounts. So
How would you do that?
Well, you can actually we can start up our own bank.
Setting up a government-run bank.
Yes. Setting up a government-run bank in Queensland so that you can actually, I'd like to be able to service the rural sector, because a lot of the rural sector who are actually going under, especially in drought time, are not looked after, or you have now foreclosure on a lot of banks are foreclosing on rural and regional properties because the valuation of the property has gone down because of drought or other circumstances. Although One Nation is leading as a Senate inquiry into the banking sector this year to actually address that, and I think we're going to have a big win in some areas there. So I can't announce anything at the moment. But
well, while we're talking about banks, and I know you're federal, not state, and it's a departure from the segment on Queensland election, but what's your opinion on the bank tax announced by the Liberal coalition?
Look, it will be passed on to the consumer, the client of the bank, but what I have been told is also... So it's essentially a tax on everybody? Well, it is a levy on the banks. That levy is actually a tax deduction by the banks as well. If it was introduced as a tax, it would not be used as a tax deduction. So whatever they're paying, they will be able to use it as a tax deduction. So it will be passed on, whether it'll be the shareholders who will actually get reduction in their share prices. A lot of those people are self-funded retirees who cannot afford it. They're living on the breadline. Or you're going to have its superannuation schemes. So people who are putting the money in super and this money is invested into the banking sector or shares. So the public are going to wear it.
Any other Queensland issues?
Well, Queensland, yes. We like to get rid of the Native Vegetation Act. It's destroying the farming sector. When you get to places outside around Charleville, you know, farmers can't cut down the mulga tree in times of drought to feed their cattle. How ridiculous. I'd like to address the coal seam gas mining happening at Chinchilla. That is having an effect on families. I've seen children with black underneath the eyes. They're waking up through the night, bashing their head against the wall. It's affecting their health issues. I think Anastasia Palaszczuk has been failed in her duty of care to these people, allowing coal gas mining. And also the fracking, which is going to affect the waterways and the water table. So there's many things there. I'd like to have a full investigation of that and stop the putting in more wells, especially what's going to have an effect on the people.
Part of the response to the Newman government was a fear of selling assets, and leasing them wasn't a problem at all. So there's been this huge lack of decision at all. We don't lease them, we don't borrow, we don't spend, we don't sell. What's your suggestion to do with the state assets?
Don't sell them. The state assets belong to the people, and it's through their taxes that they've actually paid for it. If you're going to sell an asset of any great value or worth, people must decide, not politicians who are only there for a short period of time because they can't balance their books. Most of the time, it is not a revenue problem, it is a spending problem. I have seen so much waste that is happening. That needs to be reined in. Personally, so look after our assets. A lot of these things, and I'll say that I was the one who opposed the sale of Telstra in 1996, 97, and that was a $2.2 billion, it was making for the government. I said, you sell this and you're going to lose that asset. Well, what happened was, it now makes over $6 billion profit a year. We lost about, and I estimate 56,000 people would lose their jobs. So what's happening now? We're out there trying to sell NBN, which is costing us between $55 to $60 billion to do this, and we actually have to pay Telstra. If we still owned Telstra, it would have saved us a lot of money as well. So our ports, cannot be sold. And allow any multinationals, anyone else, control our ports. There's just so many things that the government they don't have vision, and a lot of these people have never owned a business. These ones in Parliament have never owned a business. They've never employed people. They don't have any idea, and they're listening to the bureaucrats, and common sense has gone out the window. So
we're not going to sell the assets, because the way to balance the budget instead is to reduce spending. What's on your hit list for reducing the spending? Okay.
What I would like to do is cut the number of politicians that we have, reduce the numbers. A state parliamentarian has about 30,000 constituents. A federal member of parliament has around about 90 to 100,000 constituents. We can actually reduce the numbers, increase the number of their constituents in a state level. But in Queensland, I'd like to introduce an upper house.
Great.
So we're going to have about 93 members of parliament. That's what they're going to go to the polls. We're going to elect 93. Cut your 93 back to around about, and just figures off the top of my head, it needs to be fully investigated.
Yep.
Cut them back to around about 45, 50 lower house members. Make your upper house about 25 members, and then you actually then are reducing the numbers, increase their constituencies, but you can also give them one staff. You're going to cut back on their wages, their super, their staffing, their travel, and the cost to the taxpayer.
I'd love to see that check and balance brought back into the Queensland democracy.
Of course.
There's a lot of bad laws that get passed through the night easily without any...
I don't know if you know the history of it. Basically, they wanted to bring it in to get rid of the upper house and put to the people in around about before the 1920s. And they actually said, no, we don't want to get rid of the upper house. The state parliament passed it through and they got rid of the upper house without the will of the people.
Yeah, it's terrible. So what's next on your spending? Government bureaucracy. What reduces the government budget in Queensland after we reduce the number of politicians?
Well, just doing it. Even your infrastructure projects, I think that the attitude is because it's a government and the government's paying for it, let's just hike up the prices. I don't think there's enough accountability. I think the productivity is shocking. I think we're over-serviced. And I think we need to look at these numbers. I'd like to see a reduction in bureaucrats. I'd like to have an investigation in what they're getting paid. And I'd talk about some of the bureaucrats that are federally. They're on $700,000-800,000 a year.
Wow.
That's how much they're on.
Yeah.
I was the one who raised in Parliament in a matter of public importance what the CEO of Australia Post was getting, $5.6 million a year. Now, that was not going to be investigated. We've actually opened up an investigation into these people in these positions and what they're getting paid. So we are doing something about it. We need to be in a position. That's why it's very important. If people vote for One Nation, you'll get accountability, you'll get honesty, you'll get integrity. We'll address the real issues of concerns for the Australian people, the people in Queensland, and hopefully get the state moving. You may not always agree with everything that I say, and I'm not going to be the leader here. Steve Dickson is. I think he's a great state leader. He's had 10 years on the floor of Parliament. He's held 2 ministerial positions, and I think, and even the racing industry, they're crying out for someone to do something about the racing industry, and employs thousands upon thousands of people, but it's been shut down.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that need to be addressed. Like I said, my head is really across the federal issues, but Steve, and I'm working with Steve for the state.
We'll have to get him on the show.
Yes, please do.
I really appreciate about you wearing your heart on your sleeve. And it's, take me as I am, love me or hate me. And there's no political correctness. You're just straight to the issue. It's what the media loves about you in general, I think, and certainly what your supporters do. But thank you so much for fitting me into your very crowded, busy schedule today, and wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you really enjoyed that video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Have a look at this great video next, and check out the website for even more interesting articles and episodes later.